Muy buenos días, buenas tardes a todos. Muchas gracias por acompañarnos en otro evento de Conversando con CISOs. Este es el primer evento del 2022. Mil disculpas por habernos tomado tanto tiempo, pero Andrés y yo estamos en unas actividades adicionales, las cuales les comentaremos más adelante en las próximas semanas. Pero de todas maneras, bienvenidos a todos a este nuevo evento y aquí llegan nuestros invitados. Andrea ya sabe español porque siempre le hablo español, así que ella ya está practicando su español, así que no hay problema. Pero regresamos con ellos en un minuto. La invitación a todos para el evento virtual de Tactical Edge el 11 y 12 de mayo. Nos habría gustado hacerlo presencial, pero no es posible todavía por el tema que ya todos sabemos. Así que lo vamos a hacer de manera virtual una vez más. Y para que se registren y nos acompañen, tenemos muy buenos asistentes y muy buenos ponentes. La conversación de hoy es acerca de lo que está sucediendo en la guerra entre Rusia y Ucrania y el efecto en el tema de ciberseguridad enfocado en América Latina. Así que comencemos, cambio a inglés y comenzamos esta conversación. Cualquier preguntas por el chat o por el Q&A. Andrés Almanza no nos puede acompañar hoy, así que yo voy a estar pendiente de los chats y de las preguntas. Okay. So, sorry. Hello, my special guest, Andrea, Dr. Andrea Limbago. Welcome back. You're like with us many times. And I already told Gilles Esposito that I'm going to kill his name, so I hope that I did it okay. Gilles,
you did good.
Good. He's from Scythe. It's a really good company, good friends of Tactical Edge. And so we welcome Gilles and we welcome Andrea to the show. So let's start with this. Let's start with this whole thing. We haven't heard much. We've heard a lot of noise prior to the war commencing that everyone needs to be ready for cyber attacks. However, we haven't seen, at least from my perspective, haven't seen many of those cyber attacks until Monday, when the major cyber attack on the biggest internet provider in the Ukraine was affected, correct? Have we been yelling too much? Wow. Or has it been, really, no, we need to do the alarm, sound the alarm because it's definitely coming. Start with Andrea. Correct me, please.
Yeah, I mean, I'll push back on that a little bit, but yeah, thanks for having me here. I love these conversations, so it's always fun to be back on Tactical Edge. So thanks for having me. So I do think so. I mean, so on the one hand, I think one of the big problems is that, especially from the vendor community, that's always been, the cyber war is going to look like whatever they call it, Cyber Pearl Harbor, Cyber 9/11. That'll be this enormous explosion, and that's kind of what everyone has been looking for. And I mean, the reality is it's part of hybrid warfare. So it's in the gray zone where it's really just a lot of various activity that's going on that may not rise to that level, and it still may, by the way, right? So we just haven't seen that yet, but we have seen, I think, at least 4 different wiper malware deployed, which I'd argue that alone is a fairly big deal. We have seen other internet blackouts and attacks on other internet providers in Ukraine. This was obviously the biggest one because it was on their biggest provider, but that they weren't the first in the last month or so. There were major DDoS attacks aimed at the financial system there that caused some problems as well. And then just a huge uptick in a whole range of espionage and reconnaissance and so forth. But then I would also say, at the same time, we've seen a lot on the Ukrainian side too, as far as getting access to various Russian military personnel information and posting it online. And then also we've seen a lot of well, I just kind of poked at the vendor community. The vendor community also, especially I'd argue in the Western countries, has been providing significant defenses, and a lot of them have been doing it for free for Ukraine. And I think that'll also, so that I think the defenses have helped elevate at the same time. One of the issues in whatever you call it, cyber war, is that we don't know what's been blocked and didn't rise to that level. And I do think that the defenses have been, the community has come together on the defensive front for Ukraine as well.
Beautiful. Gilles, what are your thoughts?
Well, I got a few, but I agree with what Andrea has been saying. So yes, the attack on UKR Telecom, which is that one big internet we're talking about, has been has made the news. I think it was yesterday.
Monday, yeah.
It happened. Yeah, and they've already announced. So take this with a grain of salt. I'm not part of the intelligence community. I don't know all the details, obviously. But it didn't seem to do as much damage as it was expected to do, despite the fact that this was one of the main vector of communication between the Ukrainian government as well as their military and all that kind of stuff. But what's really interesting is that from a historical perspective, this is not the first time, right, that Russia has been attacking Ukraine. But it certainly does a lot less damage today than it did in the past. So it started in 2015 when the Russian broke into the Ukrainian power grid. Then in 2017, you had NotPetya, the malware that went not only targeted Ukraine, but went completely out of control, causing billions of dollars worldwide, that kind of stuff and all that. So it's not new what's happening in Ukraine. What's new is what Andrea was talking about, is that so traditionally you have Russian threat actors. One of the most famous one is Wizard Spider or Conti Group, and they have a bunch of people that are aligned with them, like Trickbot and Viking Spider, Twisted Spider, Logbit, Suncret, all those organizations. And what's really interesting is that now there's another side of the coin, right? It's not they only attack and then we try to resist what they're doing. It's like now there's a whole community of people that are going after them. And as Andrea was mentioning, we've gathered quite a bit of information about and crippled some of the thing from the Russian side. But even more so interesting, at the beginning when this happened and the Conti Group came out and said, we will retaliate for everybody that is against Russia and that kind of stuff and all that. They did that, and then we had a splinter group in Conti, very interestingly so. And those people said, "Well, no, we're not taking that side. We're taking the other side." So it's this is really good because they have been leaking a ton of information. Those people that decided to not go with Conti, they've been leaking a ton of information about, it included tons of things such as, the chat log, Bitcoin wallet addresses, detailed information on technical infrastructure, logistical operation, attack methodologies, even like, personal information of some of the Conti members. And I'm guessing this is gonna seriously cripple Conti. So that's a good thing, right? Another thing that is interesting is when the Vice Prime Minister Mikhailo Fedorov opened his on Twitter, he said that he was going to create a Telegram group to help, to try to help for free, as Andrea was mentioning, right? The Russian to counter all the cybersecurity threats that were expected to come from Russia and from those groups supporting Russia, right? We didn't expect this, but that group grew from 0 to a little bit more now than, I checked last night, a little bit more now than 240,000 members. Wow. To put this in perspective, even if only 1% of those people, it's like 99% are curious people to want to see what's happening, and only 1% of them are actual hackers or people that have talent to help prevent what the Russians are trying to do. That would be, a lot more than what the Conti group, the core group of Conti is, which is about 50 to 100 members, right? So it's crazy. I mean, the support that they've gotten, and I think we expected to see something that was much more damaging to Ukraine so far, and it has not happened. That's my point.
And so that leads us to this conversation. We know that the focal point is the Ukraine and maybe Europe, with the allies, right? How does that,
US.
the US, obviously, well, the US is by default. But from the Latin American region, from the CISOs that are present here and that will watch this pre-recorded, how should they be worried? I mean, we're talking about third-party supply chain. How should they be worried down here, Andrea, in this area?
Yeah, I think I'd build on what Gilles said as far as think back to NotPetya, and that was targeted at Ukrainian software, and then look at the global collateral damage that happened from that. And so I think if I were a CISO in Latin America, I'd be concerned about that collateral damage as one of the core priorities. And I think in the U.S., CISA has done a good job with their shields up. I almost look at it as a public service announcement that they've been doing for shields up, and I think it's been great. Like I like what they've been doing, and I would recommend following what the recommendations they're providing for various kinds of defenses and staying alert on what's going on. Because that really what the recommendations they're making for the U.S. companies, while many in the U.S. you might be more of a target potentially than in Latin America, there is that collateral damage, and then there's also just the issue of supply chains, like you said, where your own suppliers may be coming from Europe or in the US, and they may be impacted, which then could ripple throughout your own supply chain as well. And so having that visibility both on what's going on and creating the defenses appropriately for protecting against what could be collateral damage, and then looking at where your suppliers are and so forth to see how and where your vulnerabilities might be to protect in those regards as well, and to start working on information sharing to see what they're seeing, to make sure that that line of communication is open in case something does happen.
Right. Yeah. And I was looking at the CISO Shield and Gilles, if you can share that, but that you share with us, but share it with everyone. Yeah, because you put it, but it was too.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, I'll
because that's a good one. No, because okay. CISA, following Andreas, right? They're offering cybersecurity as a service for free. I think it's only for US based companies. But hey, you can always try, because if you identify yourself as a third-party supply chain, which is the big concern nowadays, most probably they would like to help out as well. Talking about the supply chain, there's so many things that CISOs have to worry about, right? I mean, not only internally to their network, right? But now they have to also worry about, are my third-party vendors, my partners, are they secure enough? Gilles, do you have that the presentation, that slide?
Oh, I do. I could.
You have it ready. Yeah, show it to us in a little while when you have a chance. And
I'll pull it out and let me know when you want me to share it. Absolutely.
Yeah, no, whenever you're ready. Because this, we keep talking about the supply chain thing, and Gilles showed me something the other day that I've seen it and I've used it for something else. But it's amazing, right? The huge number of third-party vendors that we have to deal with, and so the question is, again, how do you expect CISOs to focus not only on their internal, but now they also have to worry about supply chain? Let's start with Gilles. How do you recommend CISOs, deal with this two things front war, basically?
So, and unless Andrea wants to start with this, I'll go ahead. But okay, so
and you can share the screen if you want to right now.
For me, it's really Ukraine war or not Ukraine war. It's business as usual, right? The first thing I need to say is that year over year, we have something along the lines of a 300% increase of malware and ransomware attacks and those type of things, right? The fact that, so how do you is the Ukraine war, does it have an impact with you? Yeah, because there's going to be splashes alongside of the primary targets, which are obviously Ukraine and everybody that has voiced from a government perspective or from a company perspective or a corporate perspective, their support for Ukraine are going to be prime targets, right? Does it mean everybody else is immune? Not at all. It's, as I said, it's business as usual. And a lot of people do this for ideological purposes and all that. much more of them from a threat actor perspective do it for financial gain, disruption, those type of things, right? So completely in agreement with you and with Andrea that you need to have a level of cybersecurity hygiene that is even more so advanced than it used to be in the past. What Ed was referring to, I think, is, let me find the share button here, and because this is really an interesting. Do you guys see this?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is like
this is incredible. I mean, this just paints the
when I talk to partners and customer, yeah, I'm like this is, well, I manage channels and partnerships and alliances, so I don't talk to customer directly, but I talk to partner and they say, what is the problem you're trying to address for our customers? So you guys here listening to us, thank you, by the way, today. Those are the customers, right? The CISOs and the people that are trying to protect their companies, their asset, their IP, everything, their production, to a better level than it was yesterday. And my guess is that your number one problem is that the landscape and all the tools, all the methods, all the everything that are available out there to be able to get to a better cybersecurity posture is just completely nuts. So and figuring out, where do I start? What makes the most sense for me on an investment perspective to put my dollars towards, right? Is it going to be this? Is it going to be XDR, EDR? Is it going to be detection? Is it going to be firewalls? Whatever, right? It's humongously complicated, and so there's two things here, right? From an approach perspective, I think we'll go to this later. From a supply chain perspective, it's the word chain that resonates with me, right? All this environment, because of lateral movement, because of the ability to infest, right, other computers and other endpoints and those kind of thing, it's not just you and your organization, right? That's something that I think is really important. It is your suppliers, your partners out there as well, that you have to hold just as accountable as you hold yourself and your team to try to have a healthy cybersecurity posture, right? I mean, we saw it was Okta. It was not Okta. It was like a third party. We thought it was many other things, right? And it becomes a global problem. And the tools from CISA or the tools from any other organization we have in the US or outside of the US that are meant to help with providing you information, or at least a blueprint as to where to start and where to do it, maybe in a more efficient way to try to up that cybersecurity posture. It's cybersecurity. There's no borders here, right? So those that are the tools that are working here, they work in LATAM. Things that are being developed in LATAM can probably work here as well. I mean, there's a lot of things out there, but it also looks like this problem statement, right? This picture, and I'm going to stop sharing right now. But it's for me, it's really figuring out, right? I took this analogy with you, Ed, which is to say, you have two types of medicines, pretty much, right? And when you think about cancer in general, and I don't want to offend anybody that has been affected by this in any way, shape, or form, but I think it's a good example, so bear with me. You can get cancer and go see an oncologist, right? And the oncologist is going to try to help you cure that illness and fix you, right? But that's not enough. If you only wait to get something and then get it fixed, it's going to cost you a lot of money, a lot of pain, and from a cybersecurity perspective, you're going to be damaged to a level that can be completely crippling, regardless of the remediation that can be done after. We are more, and I think prevention is more important. And can you prevent 100% from being affected by malware and ransomware and all that? Absolutely not. But can you up your game to a point where threat actors are going to give up on you and go target something else because you did the right thing and you have a good cybersecurity posture? Absolutely. I've been doing this for years, and I've seen many times attacks that were not foiled because they could have kept insisting and trying to get through, and they would have eventually succeeded. but the amount of effort that it was required from a particular threat actor was so high that they decided to go attack something else that was not as well defended as your organization. So for me, the oncologist is important because maybe you're going to get cancer, but if you have a healthy diet, a healthy lifestyle, and if you're preparing to not get there, you will probably do much better. That's my point.
So, Andrea, that, I mean, when we talk about supply chain, that slide it's eye opener, because yes, we say supply chain, but once we see what it actually means, how do we deal with that? I mean, that's just amazing.
Yeah, it is. And if you think about, that slide on its own is an enormous, eyesore with so much going on. But that's the digital supply chain of cybersecurity, of like security vendors, right?
Exactly.
Then you expand it to the point on all the other kind of vendors that you use, everything from Microsoft or Google or whatever you use for like office kind of work, to the whole range of other kind of applications that you use. And then that just is a digital supply chain. Then you add more of your physical supply chain. So it's global brands have something like tens to hundreds of thousands of suppliers, and so there is I'd argue you need technology to help keep track of that. The human brain cannot keep track of hundreds of thousands of suppliers all at once and figure out what's going on with the risk. And so there does need to be that visibility to start tracking. And so I'd say that the first step really is, on the IT front, you're making an assessment of what you have, and that's becomes part of the core cyber hygiene component.
Exactly.
But then expanding that though into looking at it, so who are their suppliers and who are their suppliers, and that's where the collective collaboration becomes really, really important. And I'd also argue that helping think about internally how the organizations are structured. We're increasingly seeing a lot of the CISOs working with procurement as well, and so ensuring, or at least working toward the procurement process and integrating security requirements as they're thinking about as a contract is coming up, or they're thinking about a new supplier, integrating a security checklist as well when they're looking at that. And very often you see CISOs over here and procurement over here, and we really need to get them closer together due to these supply chain risks. And I think that will help a lot. And then you'd have to take it even further. Other organizational collaboration in the realm of working with compliance officers or privacy officers, because there's a whole range of various kinds of technologies, at least in the U.S., that are not allowed to be in the supply chain anymore due to national security risks for data access. And I think that those same products provide the similar kind of risks for data access, illegal data or unwanted data access to Latin American companies as well. And so I do think there's a lot of organizational shifts as well. I mean, I think there's a lot on the tech side that need to be focused on, but it kind of goes back to the people, processes, and technology, which kind of is a overused refrain, but it really hits the point on this, because if we get those people working together organizationally on top of understanding what the technologies are and how they can both provide defenses and having visibility on it, I think that can help companies go a long way. But it's hard. Like, let's be honest about that. This is a very tough problem that one person or one unit can't solve alone. It's going to require multiple collaboration internally and then collaboration, with your partners.
And I just share with everyone something called from the White House, from CISA, about fact sheet, act now to protect against potential cyber attacks. And it gives you, right, a list of what the White House recommends. And I'm looking at this, and this is what we've been saying as basic hygiene for 20 years? Mandate the use of multi-factor authentication. I'm pretty sure most everyone is using multi-factor authentication, but then, right, with the Okta hack, multi-factor company right there, how useful was it? Deploy modern security tools to continuously look and mitigate threats. Again, we go back to the Okta hack, right? They detected on their third party, detected that something was going on, but there was no response. It seems like there was no response to it. Right now, Okta seems to be coming and saying, well, it wasn't as big and as it was, mentioned and all these other things. But anyway, right, and make sure the systems are patched, back up your data, run exercises, and drill your emergency plans. encrypt your data, educate your employees. Those are all the same things we've been saying for 20 years. So it doesn't.
Yeah, the most infuriating one is for me is the patching thing, right? This
It's
is
the most
probably
difficult.
like,
It's the most
yeah,
difficult.
no, it's not. It is not. I mean, you don't have to create the patch. You don't have to. It is not. It is the most efficient thing that can
Yes, but
happen
it's
in the
difficult.
environment.
But it's difficult to apply and to implement. That's what I'm saying.
I
These are all things that have been saying for a long time, right? And it's easier to say. It's much more difficult to actually do or implement. And we all agree. I mean, one of the things that I didn't notice there was do your inventory and not what you have. I mean, I'm glad that they dumped that out of there because that's just like, yeah, all right, whatever. How do you do that? But again, my question is, the recommendations are the same ones. Nothing has changed. But the weapons used or the TTPs have become more and more sophisticated. But the defenses are still the same. How do we explain that?
Well, there's been some evolution, right? And again, it depends. I mean, if you're talking about pure defenses, so you pre-boom before you get hacked and that kind of stuff, there's been quite a bit of evolution. So I'm going to talk about my sphere here without mentioning any name. So I'm not trying to sell anything, but pre-boom, what we had like 20 years ago or less than that was, just manual penetration testing, do everything. Let's see how your defenses are going to react. And this was super long to put in place and build and do and completely manual and all that, right? Then we took a different approach for that. Like a little bit later, we're like, okay, we're gonna do bug bounties. So we're gonna pay people to bring us like vulnerabilities and all that. And this is where you start to see the development of things, all the way up to Project Zero at Google, which is like hunting for those type of things, vulnerabilities in big companies, day in day out, right? Not only for Google but for everybody else outside of Google as well. And then it started to get interested because people understood that to have a good strategy in place, you need two pieces of information. You need to understand what is the goal, where do you want to go, right? So in the realm of cybersecurity, it's like as high as possible a cybersecurity posture, right? We're not going to say 100% because we know that's a myth at this point, but as high as possible. That's your goal. And then before you get your goal, you need to know where you come from, right? You need to know what is the current state before you can get to the desired state.
Current state, yeah.
And from a cybersecurity perspective, your current state is to find out in your wall and your castle, where are the holes, right? What are going to be the things that to get to your desired state, you're going to need to address first in order to be able to get there. Otherwise, you're going to need, if you want to address everything, you're not going to be efficient. And you're going to need a budget that is a lot more than the budget you have today, right? So a lot more. And this is what some tools, not mentioning anything, but this is what some companies and some tools are focused on now. So it started with breach and attack simulation, right? You put agents in all your system, you run TTPs that are, the problem with those is that they're static, they don't evolve, they're not adapted to the attack of your particular environment, which means it's not exactly what real threat actors are going to be doing because they don't just throw a piece of software at you and wait to see what's going to happen. They work with every procedure of a TTP as defined by the attack matrix from MITRE, right? And when they see detection on one piece, one procedure or whatever, they tweak this to do it a little bit differently or go another way and then do lateral movement or whatever the case might be. So BAS is good, not enough. Now we're getting into emulations, right? So emulations like BAS, but better because it's really what the threat actors are going to do. Does this fix anything? Nothing. It fixes nothing. What it gives you is a blueprint, right? And it says you're weak here. Like we just acted like we were Conti and tried to hack you. And guess what? We have succeeded to get to the point where we wanted to get, encrypted your files, exfiltrated them. But we're the good guys, so we actually didn't do that, right? So now you know this before somebody is going to be able to try and do it for real. Fix it, right? Fix it. And this is the whole concept of having red teamers or tool that can emulate what a red team is doing combined with blue teamers, the defensive tool which everybody has. Not a whole lot of people have red teams, but now there's tools to automate this and do that. And then, I'll do tabletop exercise called, purple teaming, where the offense and the defense are going to be able to talk together and say, the defense goes, that's our goal. The offense says, that's where we are. And how do we bridge that gap, right? And as you address this, and by the way, what's really important is not to do this once a year from a CISO perspective.
Most continuous.
You have to do this continuously because everything evolves. And every time you're going to have a piece of technology, or you're going to change your internal processes, or you're going to have new people joining the team or people leaving the team, this is going to change the dynamic of your cybersecurity posture, right?
Right. And let me stop you there. Andrea,
Yeah.
I just share with everyone, again, something else from CISA.gov, that it's something that they are putting something new. I didn't know they were doing that, where they're listing the latest known TTPs, and they actually map it to the MITRE attack. I think that is incredible.
Yeah, I think, we really have over the last month, I've just been very impressed with the broader security community, private sector, public sector. We've seen so much collaboration on this front that it's really at unprecedented levels. And we hear so often sort of the public-private sector divide, and they don't share information, and they basically have a hard time even being in the same room sometimes. But I think this is one of the just many examples that we're seeing of the government providing just a great public service in the area of how to get greater security. Just before the invasion, there was a lot of collaboration with Microsoft in the government that they were very open about, and I think it occurred in ways of information sharing that really hadn't been done to that extent in the past. And there've been other areas, various botnets they discussed and so forth, and some collaboration, but this was really almost preemptive and real-time collaboration. And I think it's really great to see. One thing I'd add a little bit from the other component on with the White House providing all the sort of, here are the steps that you need for basic cyber hygiene. I think that just makes it, in your point that it's what we've been saying for years. I think clearly though, still as a community, we're not doing a good job communicating this to other people outside of ourselves. And I think that list highlights that, because we do keep seeing the same defenses brought up. And what we keep seeing though is that so many organizations aren't doing multi-factor authentication. They're not encrypting their data. And so we kind of have to also look internally and think like, why is that they're not doing those? And there is the human element to it where it was Wendy Nathers has made very popular or famous the cyber poverty line.
So
not all companies can afford to do the billions or millions of dollars to get all the back to that chart that you showed, to get even a couple of those, it becomes very expensive. And so that, I think that's again where collaboration becomes important. And what we've seen is actually some of the bigger companies who have really core suppliers who may not be able to invest the resources or prioritize in cyber, they're actually providing some of that, the resources to enable them to do red teaming. And I think that again is where you can see if you have a very core supplier and they're maybe aren't achieving that level of security that you want them to be achieving, and they just don't have the resources. And if you do have those resources, you can help out there, and that would help elevate both. So it basically helps limit that third-party access to your own system, and then helps elevate across the entire network. And that's where we're seeing, I think, a lot of interesting innovation in this area of collaboration, both in the private sector and then with these kind of things where the government's posting just a lot of these best tips and so forth. I think the more that we can see that, the better off we all are.
And that was my question. Do you see in your crystal ball, after this conflict hopefully ends soon, do you see this collaboration continuing, because it's shown that it works? Do you see the industry continuing being glued and working together for the common good? Andrea, what do you think?
I'm gonna be cautiously optimistic on that. I really do think this has been a wake-up call. I think that, on the one hand, the bottom line for sure in the private sector will still is what prevails. But I think everyone is seeing the mutual benefit through this collaboration. Whereas in the past, it's really kind of been, especially government and private sector, it's been viewed very much so as a one-way street for where there's information being shared generally from the private sector to the government and not as much in the other opposite direction. And so the more that we're seeing it be of a mutual benefit, the more we'll see it. I think if it does return back to where not everyone feels like they're benefiting from it, unfortunately they probably won't. But I do think that this has been a really good use case that I think it's going to change the way a lot of the industry works and the way that cybersecurity evolves over time. And I'm excited for that. I think it's long overdue, and like I said, we can't do it alone. So it will require collaboration, because clearly what we've done in the past hasn't worked, right? I mean, we keep seeing the major attacks that happening over and over and over again.
Well, Jeremiah Grossman, he said it a few weeks ago, right, in a tweet. He said that a report says that $120 billion has been spent globally on cybersecurity per year. Still, the attacks continue. So his question was, do you think if we double that number to $240 billion, will that reduce the attacks? Or conversely, if we have that, right, will the attacks double then? And he's like, I don't think it's going to make a difference. And that goes with what you're saying, right? It hasn't worked in the past. Maybe this is going to help us a little bit. Going back to you, Gilles, with Gilles, with your example, keeping the CISOs in America, right? Staying constant and everything. Using these resources from CISA Shield, right? Where it lists, these are the known TTPs, the 20, it just listed new ones today, right? And if you have the program like the one that you said, that continues testing their environment to newer threats, this is a good combination, not only for Latin American CISOs, but CISOs worldwide, to continue staying current with their current defenses, correct?
Yeah, well, staying current and expanding or reducing somewhat the number of paths that threat actors are going to have access to, because you're going to know that if a threat actor goes after you and they use, I don't know, Log4j, Conti, APT3, something like this, right, which are very known payloads, very known threats, but you've done multiple exercises against those threats and their variations, and now you're able to detect everything as soon as it arrives and all that, your chances of being hacked using those particular threats are going to be much smaller than if you don't do anything, right? Now, the number of threats we have, for example, so we work with MITRE and Atomic Red and all those people that are cataloging all those kind of things and all that. It's a big number. It's maybe there's 200 of them or something like this, right? And and those tools that I mentioned, when you used to be to have to prepare a campaign to test your defenses in days or weeks, now you can do it in sub 90 seconds, to give you an example, right?
Okay.
For one threat. So it's
but here's the question.
My point is to say, just let me finish with this, Ed. My point is to say, what you start to say about the continuous stuff is for me is the key thing, right? It's not something you do once a year, once a quarter, once something like. No, it's like.
Well, it's
that's all you can do. That's great. Do it at a minimum, as much as you can do. But try to prioritize that thing, because it's just like a football team, huh?
Yeah.
Practice.
Yeah, no, tell my Colombian national team that were eliminated because they didn't follow their whole. Anyway, but going back to your statement, and goes with Andrea's statement, right? Is like this collaboration again from CISA. I haven't seen this, right? It's almost on a daily basis. Here's new TTPs. Yeah. This is stuff that it's free, that then it's up to us as CISOs to figure out. And this is my question for Andrea. What do you think? It's like, should CISOs take a look at all those and say, I want to test against all of those? Or just like, well, this is for this one industry, this is for that other industry, right? As you said, collateral, that's a big word. Like, collateral means it's independent. It will attack if you're healthcare, pharma, financial. Should we start looking at, this one TTP, even though it's for financial, it could affect healthcare? Or do we still focus on industry? I mean,
yeah, I think you focus more so on looking back what your inventory, what you're using, and first looking at how do those vulnerabilities match to the software that you're relying on, or something that's within your own technology stack, and prioritize those first. And so it really does get back to knowing your system, knowing knowing yourself, right?
Right.
To then be able to prioritize. And I think on the one hand, it'd be easy, or it'd be great to say, yeah, just check them all and you're fine. But the reality is that there are going to be ones that are going to be more relevant, and there's also a matter of your resources and time, right? So I'd look at the ones that might be most applicable to what your technology stack looks like, and then look at the industry component and and even sometimes it's country component. There's some great research on certain ransomware that targets Brazil alone, and so I think that.
So really quick, and I was talking to Gilles before the call. There's the Lapsus group, right? It's now impersonating like police departments or government agencies, which they've done in the States from the FBI to request information, private information specific to an individual, right? And because the ISPs get this from the FBI.gov or whatever, and they verify that it's genuine, it's not spoofed, then they provide information about that individual, right? That's just to me just incredible, because it just opens up, right, this attack mode to anybody. It now is a supply chain issue. You're a supply chain issue to all partners. I'm a supply chain. Gilles is a supply chain, right? And then Lapsus says that they've done it in Latin America, where they took over an Argentinian government institution, right? And again, so that goes with what you're saying about your country, right? You have to keep up with this type of attacks. The question is, we see that from CISA.gov. Is there something that is going to be, do you see, Andrea, do you think, or region-wise coming up like that?
I mean, it's a good question. So on one hand, I think it would be great to see that. I'm not aware of it, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist.
Will that be something that will have to be then led by mostly research organizations like yours or Atlantic Council, partnering with universities and things?
I think it could be. Also where we're seeing some interesting aspects of this start to emerge are in pre-existing data or trade agreements that now incorporate cross-border trade, like digital trade as well. Okay. So it falls under the umbrella. Something like a Mercosur, for instance, in Latin America, could in theory be the place where they highlight this for the region and become a good regional hub for digital risk and digital compliance and so forth as well. In some cases, we are seeing that. If you look at in the United States, the NAFTA 2.0, what that became, that has a lot on digital trade in it. And I think so maybe it could potentially be that these trade agreements that already exist, instead of having to create something new or relying on, independent think tanks and so forth to produce that, it could be something that does become from a regional government or regional, at least a regional international, IGO, could take on that. But I haven't seen them, I think what CISOs is doing right now is very unique, and we have, like, to your point, that we haven't seen this before. Yeah. But I think it could provide that roadmap for a Mercosur or other kinds of trade agreements to follow suit, to provide the regional focus on it that is needed. Because, like we said, there are certain TTPs that do target both certain countries and certain industries, and that can really go a long way. So when we see the sort of the broad, like a virus total or something that covers everything across the globe, it's very helpful, but it misses the regional nuances that are really important.
And Gilles, how do you do that with the solution that you guys offer? Is it regionalized or can it be regionalized?
No, so I at the beginning when Andrea was talking about this, she mentioned the environment and the fact that I think you did, that there are some similarities that you're going to have from industry to industry. And this is not the vertical that or the industry that defines what kind of threat is going to be more efficient against you and all that. It's just the makeup of your infrastructure. Again, this is cyber threats, and it's a TTP is a TTP, right? It's going to be a threat is a threat. It's going to
it's borderless, right? Like as you said before,
it's borderless. It's agnostic when it comes to companies.
Yeah, they don't care.
It's agnostic when it comes to industries and that kind of stuff. Yes, there are some trends that we can see and all that. Doesn't mean you're immune to the others. Again, right? It's just some threat actors. I've tried 3 companies in healthcare, and they were successful in 3 hacks with the same threat. Guess what? Why break something that works, right? So they're going to keep using it. Doesn't mean that hack is not going to work in another industry, and doesn't mean other hacks are not going to work against that industry. Number one thing. So be careful with like segregating this kind of thing, because threats are agnostic. That's my number one thing. Now, maybe they work better on this type of vendor that most
because
people
the
in
TTP
healthcare
is
are
different.
using,
Yeah, exactly.
right? Or that type of thing, right? Because they haven't done what was necessary to fix their systems, blah, blah, blah. That's number one thing. On the other thing that Andrea was talking about, and what you were asking about, this merging and all that, again, it's super important that we collaborate on this, because nobody can do it alone. When you see companies the size of Amazon and Microsoft and Google that have very deep pockets reaching out for all their partners around the world to try to get help to fix their stuff, and that tells you something. When you see something like the US government with an enormous budget that it has, and have organization ranging from something I posted as well, that can help people, from InfraGard, from the FBI to CISA, to all those organizations, right? Asking for better collaboration, all that. That's a sign that the problem is gigantic, and if we're not collaborating, all of us, to try to help, right? It is not going to. It's not going to work. And when you look at the makeup of threat actors today, so we always have this image of like a couple 16-year-old kids in their basement, and
Well, it's no longer an image; it's a reality, right?
Hey, wonderful! Yeah, that was like last century, right? No, it's not working like this. They're organized like corporations.
So
They have HR department, finance department, all that kind of stuff. They supply from one group to the other and all
Right.
that. They share resources. It's amazing. They're operating at peak performance.
right.
Yeah.
I just shared another link from CISA, which is an alert that came out 2 days ago or 8 days ago. And the funny thing is, when you read that, it talks about, all these things from 2011, right? 2011. So we started the conversation with, the cyber war that's currently going on in 2022, and about, how much it has advanced, all these attacks. But in reality, we're still dealing with issues from 2011. Lapses with Okta. I mean, if it's true, what Mandian came out the report a couple of days ago. I mean, the kids or the guys were just going in there, getting control, and then just doing Bing search for all hacks that still worked. So my question is, we had the alerting in place, we had the detection in place. It seems like what we're failing is in the response aspect. We're not taking those things too seriously, or as Andrea said at one point, there's so many alerts coming. One person cannot do it. Two people cannot do it. You need a large amount of people. How then do you actually react to an alert when the system that you deploy, your defensive, is actually working, but you're still getting hacked because you're not responding to that? I mean, is that an issue, Andrea, or am I just making things up, as I always do?
No, I mean, I think the alert fatigue is a real thing. That
Okay.
The fact that it's called alert fatigue, it's been coined, so we know it's real. It absolutely is, and I think that's where if we can get those, continue to leverage technology and data analytics to get those more customized for each of the individual customers, so they know what to focus on. And I think even this example is looking at on the energy sector. I do think it's a good example of where industry matters, and it's not necessarily whether it's a target, intentionally as that industry, but it's that software. So there's certain software across each of the industries that tends to be targeted, and that's where the industry information becomes relevant. And that's where, we see that there's certain financial software, and that's why if there's targeting the financial industry, it's really that software that they're targeting. But that's where I think that information, why that industry component or angle is important to look at that software that you use. But that's, again, I think such a good example of where you need the customization. You need to have, really, it's the human computer interaction, yet again, to make it so that they know what they can surface. And then also the fact that it has been for a decade, clearly there's been, plenty of time. We see this example over and over again where, it's an opportunistic attacks can happen, exploiting vulnerabilities that have been known about for quite some time.
Yes.
And I think that just gets back to, though, again, as a community, for us to do a better job communicating what's important and why it needs to be done. And then on, looking internally, making sure and having that as one of those priorities on the list to make sure that we've gone through and we see what's getting exploited, what's most relevant to us based on our own technology stacks, and prioritize those to make sure that we're not getting exploited by something that 10 years ago was identified.
Yeah, and Gilles, the White House on a statement on March 24th said, "My administration will continue to use every tool to deter, to disrupt, and if necessary, respond to cyber attacks." The first two are important: detect and disrupt.
Mm-hmm.
Those are very important things.
So I don't know what we're talking about here exactly. The message is a little cryptic. There is a big discussion at the government level here to tackle the problem as a whole in a little bit different way than we're doing today, right? Because traditionally everything we've been doing today is defend. And now we're starting to see what's happening in Ukraine when we reverse the steam and we start attacking as well. We're getting quick, better results, right? I mean, just look at, again, I'm going to take the analogy of a football game, and I'm saying football, Jen, I'm sorry, I'm talking about soccer here. Andrea, because of the crowd, but it's like a team that is only going to be defending, they're going to get scored against at some point, right? And this is what's happening. Now, it's a very delicate discussion from a political standpoint as to whether or not we should take offensive actions from a cybersecurity perspective, right? But I am a proponent of that. So, but that's only me. It doesn't, it's not my company, not my country or my countries. I'm not talking for anybody but me. I think we should do that. And I talk to the people in the cybersecurity space. I have a very good friend, Guillermo, who's a lawyer for a firm that manages the payment of ransomware and that kind of stuff for big companies when they get hit. And he's like, he's always telling me, we need to reverse the steam here. We need to put the pressure on them. I mean,
because they know, because we know,
because
we know who they are.
People, you know.
Yeah, we know who the people are. Yeah, exactly.
Well, we don't know who they are, but it's 60 folks that are responsible as of last year for 15% of all the ransomware that have been successful. 60 people, really? I mean, it's like we gotta be, we gotta be more active, not just from a defensive perspective, but that, I'm sure that doesn't interest the crowd that we have today because they're not gonna be doing this.
Right.
So I'll pass on this one. But.
Okay. So closing remarks, Andrea, for the CISOs in Latin America, should they keep an eye on these things? Yes, they do need to be concerned now.
I think 100%. You keep an eye on it. Get you prepared for whatever might be collateral damage. Whatever may end up escaping and going into the wild. I think 100% be prepared for that. Honestly, as you see, hopefully Russia continues to get back more and more into a corner. But what happens with that though is also when they may be lashing out even more, especially in the cyber domain.
They have nothing else to lose.
Almost greater concern for more chaos to ensue as they're not doing as well in the war. And obviously we want them to not do well in that war. We definitely are taking sides on that. But just means that they may be less careful and may be more prone to lashing out as they potentially get back more and more into a corner. So I think focus on that, and then just to the point that sort of the foot stomp the notion on the collective resilience notion and collaboration of one way to do that isn't just looking internally. That is a core component of it, but make sure that what you're doing in preparation, communicate that with your suppliers, with your partners, and help encourage them to be doing the same thing. And so that as a community, if we can all become more prepared for this and share that information as we see things going on in real time, I think the better off we will be to proactively address something that may come. And and I'd rather be prepared and hopefully nothing happens. But if we look at history, and it's it's very recent history, we see that it does get out of control.
And we're not saying go ahead and spend like $1 zillion on new equipment. Is basically establish some type of program internally to find out how you are from a cybersecurity perspective. How are all your devices working together to protect you? That's the basics, right? That's what we're saying.
And your people and your processes and all that kind of stuff. So wholeheartedly agree with what Andrea just said. I'll add another thing since we started with Ukraine. I'll add another thing that was suggested also by the government and all that. It's like when you're not involved in that conflict, like we're all involved, but not directly involved in that, don't poke the bear. Don't make like stupid statements, publish stuff and all that, and wave the flag and all that kind of stuff. Do your thing. Don't poke the bear. Those groups can take attention on you, and you can become an easy target if you're not at a level. And we've seen that happening quite a few times. And let the government handle those kind of things and that kind of stuff. And I provided a link if you want to help the Ukraine government from the Vice Prime Minister. You can join this group of hackers, ethical hackers, and that's great. But yeah, try to. You already have enough to do to protect yourself without incurring the wrath of those threat actors even more. So
okay, that's a good point. Don't go on social media. Yes. Try to refrain. That's a good point.
I mean, you could as a person, but as a company, it's
you turn yourself as a target. Well, thank you so much, Andrea, Gilles, thank you so much. A todos, muchas gracias por acompañarnos. Va a estar, está siendo grabado y estará disponible esta tarde. Y la invitación es para la próxima semana, el próximo miércoles en el mismo canal a la misma hora. Muchas gracias a todos. Bendiciones, Gilles, Andrea.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Nice to meet you, Andrea. Thank you.
Yeah, you too.
Bye.
Bye-bye.